The control room had gone silent. Radios hissed softly, radar screens flickered in dim light, and every face in the command center was pale. Somewhere above the mountains of eastern Afghanistan, the radio call had gone dead. The A-10 Warthog, callsign Reaper 6, had vanished off radar. For a full minute, there was only static. Then a voice cracked through, full of static and pain. Taking fire, controls failing, Reaper 6 going down. Then nothing. The general, a man hardened by decades of war, clenched his fists and lowered his head. Reaper 6 is down, he said quietly. His voice trembled despite years of restraint. The base fell into silence. A soldier whispered a prayer. Someone slammed a fist against the console. And far away, in the smoke-filled mountains, Captain Eliza Ward, one of the Air Force's finest, was still fighting for her life inside a burning A-10, refusing to die quietly. Before we continue, this is Grow for Justice, where we tell the stories of courage, honor, and humanity that the world needs to hear. If you're watching this right now, take a second to hit that subscribe button and tell us in the comments where you're watching from, because this story will remind you what true courage looks like. Eliza's world was chaos. The cockpit filled with smoke, the right wing shredded by anti-aircraft fire. Warning lights screamed across her dashboard. Her heart pounded as she fought the stick, trying to level the plane that wanted nothing more than to die. "Come on, girl, stay with me," she muttered, gripping the controls. The A-10 was a tank in the sky, built to take punishment, but even tanks had limits. A direct hit had torn through her fuel line, and the altimeter was dropping fast. At 8,000 feet, she knew she was in serious trouble. Below her stretched a valley held by enemy fighters. If she ejected now, she'd land right in their arms. If she stayed, she might burn alive. She made her decision. "If I'm going down," she said through gritted teeth, "I'm taking them with me." She rolled the Warthog into a low dive, targeting a convoy moving through the valley below. Through the smoke and fire, her eyes found the vehicles, armored trucks loaded with weapons. She pressed the trigger. The Gu-8 cannon roared to life, spitting thunder into the earth. The ground erupted in explosions, vehicles flipping into fireballs. For a moment, it looked like the wrath of heaven had descended on that valley. Then the left engine failed. The aircraft jerked violently, spinning out of control. The last thing she saw before blacking out was the horizon spinning into a blur of smoke, mountains, and flame. Back at Bagram Air Base, the situation room was chaos. Communications officers scrambled to re-establish contact. Drones were rerouted to the area, but the radar showed only static and wreckage. The general, Major General Darius Cole, stared at the feed in disbelief. "She's gone," he finally said, his voice breaking. "Reaper 6 is down." The base fell silent. Some soldiers bowed their heads. Others simply stared, hollow-eyed, at the map. Eliza had been more than a pilot. She was a legend among her peers, known for her fearlessness and her strange sense of humor, even under fire. Losing her wasn't just a tactical loss. It was personal. But 60 miles away, deep in the mountains, a faint sound crackled through a damaged transponder. A single heartbeat on the radar flickered, then stabilized. The technician blinked. "Sir, you need to see this." Eliza's eyes opened to pain. Fire licked the edges of her cockpit, smoke choking her lungs. Her hand trembled as she reached for the ejection lever, but it was jammed. Her parachute gear was useless. Every muscle screamed in agony. But through the haze, she could see movement outside. Enemy fighters closing in, rifles raised. "I'm not dying here," she hissed. With a final surge of strength, she kicked open the cockpit glass, flames searing her flight suit. She dropped to the dirt, rolling hard, her side burning. Gunfire cracked nearby. She grabbed the pistol strapped to her thigh and crawled behind a wrecked wing. Every breath was agony, but adrenaline drowned out the pain. The enemy drew closer. She could hear their shouts. In the distance, an American drone operator caught sight of the heat signatures and gasped. "Sir, there's movement near the wreck. Someone's alive." The general leaned over the monitor. His eyes widened. "That's her." Get the recovery team airborne now. For the next hour, Eliza fought like a ghost among the wreckage. With smoke and dust masking her movements, she used every ounce of her training to stay alive. When a soldier crept too close, she waited for the flash of his rifle, then fired once clean, precise. She was running out of ammunition and blood, but her will refused to break. Above her, two black hawks raced across the night sky. Rescue calls buzzed over the radio. Reaper 6, this is Angel 1. Hold your position. We're coming for you. She could barely breathe. Negative, too hot here, she coughed. I'll find open ground. Her legs barely worked, but she forced them to move. Crawling through rocks, blood trailing behind, she pushed toward an open ridge she'd spotted earlier. Her vision blurred, her knees gave out, but she didn't stop. When the helicopters finally appeared, their searchlights cutting through the dark, Eliza was standing, barely upright, waving a flare with trembling hands. Bullets tore past her. She didn't flinch. She just stared up, eyes blazing. Target spotted, she's alive. Moments later, Marines rappelled down through the smoke. They surrounded her, shielding her with armored vests as rounds cracked through the air. She collapsed, whispering, "Told you I'd come back." At 2:13 hours, the call came through to Bagram base. The general, who had already prepared the casualty report, froze when he heard the words, "Sir, she's alive." "What did you just say?" "Reaper 6 survived. The Warthog is down, but she's on the Black Hawk. She's coming home." The control room erupted. Cheers, shouts, even tears. Soldiers who hadn't smiled in weeks were hugging each other. The general turned away from his staff for a moment, his voice breaking as he muttered, "You stubborn, magnificent pilot." When the Black Hawk touched down, the entire base was waiting. Mechanics, medics, infantrymen, everyone had gathered along the runway, watching the stretcher roll out. Eliza was pale, bruised, and barely conscious but alive. The flames from the wreck had burned her suit black, yet her eyes were open as the stretcher passed. Every soldier stood at attention. Even the general stepped forward, saluting sharply. "Welcome home, Reaper 6, he said softly. Eliza smiled faintly. "You declare me down too early, sir." The crowd laughed through their tears. The air filled with applause, the kind that carried more emotion than words ever could. Days later, Eliza woke up in the base hospital, arm in a sling, oxygen mask over her face. Her A-10 was gone, burned to wreckage, but parts of it had been salvaged. Someone had placed the plane's battered nameplate on her bedside table. Reaper 6 was etched in blackened steel, a silent reminder of what she'd survived. The general visited her that evening. "You know," he said quietly, "when we thought you were gone, the base felt empty. You reminded everyone here what it means to fight. Not because you want glory, but because you refuse to quit." Eliza's voice was hoarse but steady. "Sir, the Warthog didn't quit, so I couldn't either." Months later, footage of the event reached home soil. The Pentagon issued a statement calling it a miracle, but Eliza refused any medal beyond the standard commendation. "It wasn't me," she told reporters. "It was the team, the bird, and the mission." Still, her story became legend across the Air Force. Cadets would whisper it during night drills. Mechanics painted Reaper lives on their hangars. And deep down, every soldier who'd watch her return that night carried the same unspoken truth. Sometimes, even when everything says you're finished, you still find a way to land. The general would later tell the story to new recruits with the same closing words. When the flames were rising and the systems failed, Captain Ward didn't ask to be rescued. She found her way home. That's what it means to wear this uniform. And as the crowd of soldiers saluted, somewhere above them, the sound of a distant A-10 echoed across the sky. A tribute to the pilot who refused to die. That's the story of Reaper 6, the Warthog that wouldn't go down, and the woman who taught an entire base that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the refusal to surrender. If this story inspired you, if it made you feel proud of those who serve and fight for something greater than themselves, then please subscribe to Grow for Justice Right now, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Your support helps us bring you more stories of bravery, truth, and a human spirit that refuses to break. Because here on Grow for Justice, we don't just tell stories, we honor them.